Imagine, if you will, the dense pine forest of what is now East Texas. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth and wood smoke. It's early in the morning, the kind of morning where the mist clings to the ground, rising lazily towards the sky, still veiled in the first dawn of morning's light. Here in the deep green heart of the piney woods, a civilization once thrived. The ground beneath our feet is rich with the remains of a forgotten past. A past shaped by the ancient Caddo people, whose culture and influence once stretched beyond these forests, weaving through rivers, bayous, prairies of East Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. This is their story. I'm Matt Pierce. This is Phases of Time, Texas, a podcast where we dive into everything Texas. This is a place where we take a look at our past, our present, and our future. Everything begins in the past. Everything moves towards the future. That's what this podcast is about. The Texas of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The story of the Caddo people begins long before European contact, before Spanish explorers would ever set their eyes on the land what we now call Texas. Their ancestors, part of a larger cultural group known as the Mississippian peoples, they were mound builders who left their mark across the southeastern United States. But it was here, in the vast landscapes of East Texas, that the Caddo established their own unique, distinct civilization, one that flourished for hundreds of years. The Caddo people were not just a single tribe. They were a confederation of several groups, each with its own identity. They were bound together by a common language, a culture, and spiritual beliefs. They spoke a language that was from the Caddoan family, which is connected to them to other groups spread across the central and southern plains of North America. But yet the Caddo stood apart in many ways, particularly through their sophisticated social structures, spiritual practices, and their mastery of the land of East Texas. Life for the Caddo centered around the rivers, the Red, the Sabine, the Neches. They snaked their way through the territory, providing water, food, and transportation. The dense forest, teeming with deer, bear, and small game, provided meat, while the rivers yielded fish and freshwater mussels. But beyond just hunting and gathering, the Caddo, they were master farmers. They cultivated vast fields of corn, beans, squash, and sunflower. These three sisters system of agriculture, corn, beans, and squash, were the foundation of their diet, their economy, and much else. It was as much for the other Native American people as it was for themselves, but the Caddo excelled at this. Their surpluses allowed their population to grow. It fueled their complex society and their economy. In Caddo villages, the fields stretched far beyond the horizon, their corn stalks swaying in the warm breeze. These villages were organized in a way that would have seemed strikingly modern, with family dwellings arranged around a large central plaza. At the heart of these plazas stood the mounds, impressive earthen structures that survived as both religious centers and burial sites for their leaders. These mounds were carefully constructed, sometimes over many generations, their height symbolizing the power and prestige of the society that built them. The Caddo were skilled artisans. Their pottery, particularly, was renowned across the region. Crafted with intricate designs, polished with high sheen, Caddo ceramics were not just practical. They were works of art, traded far and wide. Archaeologists have found Caddo pottery as far away as the Great Lakes in Florida. Evidence of a vast trade network that sketched across the entire continent of North America. Now let's enter a Caddo village, maybe around the year 1300. Picture yourself walking through a very vast clearing in the forest. You see a large bunch of houses, their circular roofs sweeping down to the ground like giant beehives almost. They're built from tightly woven grass and reeds. Smoke rises from holes in the roofs, the smell of roasting meat and boiling maize filling the air for sure. Children are playing near the edge of the forest, while men are preparing to hunt or return to tending their crops. The Caddo were known to be tall and muscular people. Their bodies were strong from years of farming and working the land. They dressed in deerskin garments and clothing made of woven fibers. They had intricate beadwork, feathers adorning their attire. They used these during ceremonies or special occasions. Their hair was often long, worn in braids. They were adorned themselves with jewelry made from shell, bone, and copper, which they acquired through trade. But as peaceful as this village might seem, Caddo society was far from simple. Their world was deeply spiritual, and their everyday life was woven with rituals that connected them to the earth, the sky, and the ancestors that had come before them. The Caddo believed in a supreme deity, a powerful being they called Caddo, the creator of all things. Beneath this god were other lesser spirits, each associated with natural elements, water, wind, and the earth itself. At the center of Caddo life were the Zinisi, their spiritual leaders. These men yielded immense power, serving as intermediaries between people and their gods. They led ceremonies to ensure good harvest, successful hunts, and the protection of the communities from illness and disaster. When you stood on one of their mounds, you weren't just on a heap of dirt. You were on a sacred ground, a link between the earth below and the heavens above. Ceremonies were frequent and involved the entire community. One could imagine the rhythmic beating of drums echoing through the village as the Caddo danced and sang. They were dressed in colorful clothing. Their movements would have been slow and deliberate, accompanied by the sound of rattles made from gourds and deer hooves. Firelight would flicker across the scene, casting long shadows that danced along with the people, blurring the line between the physical world and the spiritual. For centuries, the Caddos thrived this way, building complex, prosperous societies. But in the early 16th century, their world would change forever. In 1542, Hernando de Soto, the Spanish explorer, made his way into what is now the southeastern United States. Though de Soto never reached East Texas, his expedition unleashed a tide of events that would ripple across the entire region, and the Caddo would soon feel the full weight of European contact. Following de Soto's disastrous journey, other Spanish explorers ventured into Caddo lands, and by the 1680s, Spanish missions were being established in Texas. One of the most notable was Mission San Francisco de los Tejas, founded in 1690 near the present-day Alto, Texas. The Spanish, of course, came with their own agenda, spreading Christianity and claiming the land for their king. But they also came with something far more deadly: disease. Smallpox, measles, and other European diseases tore through the Native American populations with terrifying speed. The Caddo, who had no immunity to these foreign illnesses, were devastated. Entire villages were wiped out in a matter of weeks. Their population, once so robust, began to dwindle, and the social fabric that had held them together for centuries began to fray. The Spanish, in their quest to convert the Caddo to Christianity, failed to understand or respect the deeply ingrained spiritual traditions that had defined Caddo life for generations. Though some Caddo did convert, many resisted to the foreign religion. They held fast to their beliefs in Caddo and to the spirits of the natural world. By the 1700s, the pressures on the Caddo were mounting. The French, now present in Louisiana, began competing with the Spanish for influence in East Texas. The Caddo had found themselves caught between two powerful European nations, each vying for control of the region. Initially, the Caddo were able to maintain their independence, playing the French and the Spanish off of each other, engaging both with trade. The Caddo were removed for their diplomatic skills. They negotiated alliances, sometimes favoring the French, other times the Spanish, depending on which relationship best served their interest at the time. But despite their efforts, the forces of colonization were relentless. By the early 19th century, the Caddo were facing increasing pressure from American settlers pushing westward. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 brought American settlers and soldiers into their lands. With the arrival of these newcomers came violence, displacement, and treaties that were broken as quickly as they were made. In 1835, just before Texas gained its independence from Mexico, the Caddo were forced to sign a treaty with the U.S. government, ceding their land and agreeing to relocate to Indian Territory in present-day Oklahoma. By this time, their population had been reduced to a fraction of its former size, and their once great civilization was scattered. Its people were displaced from the lands that they had called home for centuries. Today, the legacy of the Caddo people lives on through their civilization has largely faded from memory. The Caddo Nation is now based in Oklahoma, where their descendants continue to preserve their language, their culture, and their history. The great mounds that they once built, though eroded over time, still stand in places like Caddo Mound State Historical Site near Alto, a testament to the people whose stories stretch back into the history of Texas before Texas even existed. As we stand in the shadows of these ancient mounds, we can still feel the echoes of the Caddo people. Their world was once one of harmony with the land, a deep spiritual connection, and a resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. Though they've long since left the forest of East Texas, their influence can still be felt in the rivers that flow through the region, in their fertile soil that fed their crops, and in the memories of the land itself. And perhaps, if you listen closely enough, you can still hear the distant beat of drums carried on the wind, whispering their stories to anyone who will stop and listen. I'm Matt Pierce, journalist, reporter, photographer, historian, and all sorts of things. This is my podcast, The Phases of Time, Texas. Thank you for joining me.